Sarah. All right. I think we're ready. Well, last week I think we had the largest number of people that we'd had the whole quarter, and this week might be the smallest. Somebody said last week, said they heard that the class was over and that someone else was teaching. That's why they all showed up. So, but I appreciate you being here tonight. This is the last class of the quarter. This will be the last class of our study of the Holy Lands. And I'm not doing that, I don't think. All right, we're good, okay. Had a ghost moving it. But tonight's our last class. It's going to be a little bit of a, I'm not going to say a hodgepodge, but we spent the last couple of weeks in Jerusalem, and I'm going to finish up tonight with a couple of sites just south of Jerusalem. And then, because I don't think those will be enough to cover our time, I'm going to go to a site that I skipped. I skipped it because it's not a site, it's not a biblical site, it's not a site that's mentioned in Scripture. Most of the things that have been found there are post-Bible times, but I think it's an interesting archaeological site from a very significant city as far as size and importance. And there are some things in there that are tied to religious worship, especially to the Jews. And so if we have time, we'll do that. That'll be kind of like bonus content, okay? But I'm going to start off, and always, as always, we've got the link where all of the slides that I did, not the ones that Bruce did or Nelson, but all of the ones that I did, if you want access to those along with some annotations for the pictures, they are all available on that web address. If you don't get it now, just come to me after class and I'll tell you what the link is. But they'll be up there for until they take my website down, whenever that is. But all of the handouts, or not handouts, but all of the slides are out there. The first place that I want to talk about is a place called Herodium, and Herodium is itself not a biblical site, but is relevant to the Bible in that it was the administrative location of Herod the Great during his lifetime. The administrative center, that's the word I was looking for, the administrative center for Herod the Great. And obviously Herod the Great is very significant to the narrative of Scripture and very significant to the story of Jesus. We talked about, the very first, the first week was an introduction, and then since then, it's all, the next week we started off with Caesarea Maritima, Caesarea on the sea, which was a city built by Herod the Great. And we talked about back then that, Herod the Great was not the great because he was a great man, because he was a moral leader. He was Herod the Great because he was a great builder. I mean, he built a lot. And we've gone around, kind of gone clockwise around Palestine. We've seen a number of places that Herod the Great built. Not the least of which were, besides Caesarea Maritima, but we looked at Masada, a fortress city up on top of a mesa right by the Dead Sea. We looked at, in the city of Jerusalem, Herod the Great built the Temple Mount, all of that, surrounding area, kind of building it as his showplace, if you will. I know Nelson's talked about that some in his class on Sunday mornings. But then just south of Jerusalem is this place known of as Herodium. And Herodium is, it's a mountain, okay? It's a mountain, and it's an artificial mountain. Now, we've been talking about artificial mountains all the way since week 1, right? About artificial mountains known of as tells, that are mountains that have been built up over time as civilizations are destroyed, new civilizations are built in the same place. Herodium is not a tell. Herodium is an artificial mountain that was built or commissioned by Herod the Great to be built. And I want you to notice, I think I have it on there somewhere, it's 2,487 feet above sea level, but man-made, and built between 23 and 15 BC. So you're talking about a 2,000-foot high mountain built, over a period of eight years. Not a tell, not something that was built up over thousands and thousands of years, but an artificial mountain built by slaves working for Herod the Great over a period of 8 years, just before the time of Jesus. But Bruce and I were talking about this last week. When you look at it from a distance, it looks like a volcano. I mean, it's a mountain with like the top chopped off of it. And the reason why the top is flat is because there was a fortress/palace up on top of the mountain, which we'll look at in just a minute. And then at the base of the mountain, there was a palace. There are the remains of a palace. There's the remains of a bathhouse. There's also a bathhouse up on top. There's the remains of a bathhouse and a massive swimming pool. Now, I don't expect you to remember this, for those of you that haven't been there, but back in week 1 in Caesarea Maritima, in the palace there, right on the Mediterranean, we looked at the swimming pool that was the remains of the swimming pool that's now kind of been consumed by the Mediterranean. But there's a massive swimming pool at Herodium. But, kind of separate from Herod the Great, another significant find at Herodium, which does also directly tie in with Scripture, is that a signet ring was found at Herodium that is believed to be the signet ring of Pontius Pilate. It's not on display at Herodium. I actually don't even know. Is it on display in the Israel Museum? Don't know. I don't either. I'm not sure where it's on display, but there's a model of it there at Herodium, but it's not, the actual signet ring is not there. Now, Herodium was believed to have been conquered and destroyed as part of the Roman conquest, in and around AD 70. But it was ultimately taken back over by the Jews in the 2nd century AD as part of the Second Jewish Revolt. So there are some things that are there's some things that are in Herodium which are Jewish, from the Jewish customs of religion. We'll talk about that. And then later on, it was taken over by the Byzantines, who used that as a place of residence. So it's had a number of functions over the years. And the last thing I will say, that it is believed that this is the place where Herod the Great was buried. There has a tomb that has been uncovered. I believe it was uncovered, when some of you guys were there back in the late 2000s. It's been, further excavated. It's, as you might expect, a 2,000-year-old tomb. I mean, it's not intact. There's no inscription there that identifies this as being the tomb of Herod the Great, but Josephus, Flavius Josephus, Jewish historian, wrote 2 great works, The History of the Jews and the War of the Jews. Josephus identified Herodium as the burial place of Herod the Great, and then this massive tomb was uncovered a number of years ago. So the belief is this was the tomb of Herod the Great. Now, as far as the location of Herodium, so got a map of a significant portion of Palestine, and just to kind of retrace where we've gone. So not quite up as far as where we started, but we started over Caesarea on the Mediterranean. We worked our way up through the Jezreel Valley, up through Galilee, up all the way up to Dan. Then we started coming back down to the Sea of Galilee, down the Jordan River, down to the Dead Sea area. We went all the way down to Beersheba, and then we've come back up to Jerusalem, which is right here. Now, incidentally, this outline here with this, I guess it's blue or gray area, that is what is today known of as the West Bank. And you will notice that Jerusalem is just on the edge of the West Bank. But if you go down south of Jerusalem, down to Herodium, which is a little over 7 miles south of Jerusalem, you are back in the West Bank. Okay, whereas Jerusalem is just outside the West Bank, Herodium is in the West Bank. And so incidentally, we're not going to talk about Bethlehem tonight, but Bethlehem just inside the West Bank as well. So both of those areas, under Palestinian control. But that's where Herodium is, again, just south of Jerusalem. This is Herodium. Now, again, imagine that this is man-made, over a period of 8 years, which is, to me, of all the things that I saw with my eyes that were said to have been built by Herod the Great, this is the most impressive. Not any building made out of stone or rock, or brick or mud or whatever, but that he commissioned this 2,000-foot tall volcano, essentially, out in the middle of the Judean wilderness is just unbelievable. I mean, it's hard to fathom that, prior to him, there was nothing there. It was just desert, and he had this mountain built. And so up on top, and we'll see this in just a minute with a model, but you can see a little bit of the remains from here, but there was a fortress palace up on top of the mountain, and then kind of below down here, which you can't really see from this picture from the bus, is where there would have been a palace and a swimming pool and so forth. We'll see that in just a minute. But this is Herodium. Now, going all the way back to the beginning where, again, I said at the beginning, I'm going to show you one picture of a cat, and that's all the cats I'm going to show you, and my wife said, please show more pictures of cats. Here is a cat at Herodium. So there we go. This is in the kind of visitor center. This is a model of what, they believe, not a very detailed model, not like the Jerusalem model at the Israel Museum, but a model of where they believe, how they think that this kind of fortress area of Herodium was laid out. And so you have the mountain here with the fortress palace up on top. On the left-hand side, on this slope, you have Herod's tomb. Just below that, on the side of the mountain, you have a theater, which we'll talk more about both of those in just a minute. And then down at the base of the mountain, you have, in this complex, a palace with a swimming pool and a bathhouse here in the middle. So again, generally the layout of Herodium. This is a reproduction of the signet ring of Pontius Pilate that was found at Herodium. Again, not the original, but a reproduction of that. This is taken from, there is a road that goes up this mountain that kind of wraps around the mountain that is how you access to get to the top. I got a picture, let's see, right there. That's what it looks like. So that's the road, leading up to the top of Herodium, the Herodium mountain. From that road, I took this picture down of the, what is the outline of the, what would have been the palace at the bottom, and then this swimming pool. Swimming pool, freshwater swimming pool in the middle of the Judean desert that would have been Herod the Great's bathhouse and swimming pool. And then you can see other remains kind of in the lower right-hand corner from this palace complex at the bottom of the mountain. And then, this is kind of what the pathway, which has been fortified some from the original to allow for the groups to go up to the top. But some other views, this view is taken from the top of Herodium. I believe that this is pointing to the north toward Jerusalem. And then this one is taken to the west. If you will notice how, the buildings stop and you've got this, desert area. This is the Judean wilderness. And it's really hard to tell on the projector, but what's right behind that is the Dead Sea. So from on top of this is the tallest spot in the Judean wilderness. Even, amongst all the mountains in the Judean wilderness, this is the tallest spot there. And you can see all the way, I don't know how many miles that is, but you can see all the way to the Dead Sea from there. Now, this is the fortress, the remains of the fortress up on top of Herodium. You'll notice, the remains of a massive tower. And there's other structures within here, but this is a model of what the fortress would have looked like. So you can see the original, they believe the original kind of main tower would have looked like. And then you've got inside of here, you have a reception hall up in the upper right. Down here, which can't see from this angle, but there was a bathhouse. This is a picture of that main tower from up close, or closer. If I was too close, I wouldn't have gotten the whole tower in the picture. And then this is a bathhouse. I won't take you on an inside tour of the bathhouse because we've talked about a number of bathhouses this quarter already. But this would have been a bathhouse up on top. This is, who has a guess that has not been here? Who has a guess as to what this is? We've seen a bunch of these this quarter. It's a mikveh, that's right. So this is a cleansing pool known of as a mikveh. It is a Jewish cleansing pool, which was used for ceremonial washings of the ritualistic requirements of the Jewish religion. And this is dated back to the 2nd century A.D. So you remember I said, hey, Herodium was built 23 to 15 B.C. approximately. But in the 2nd century, the Jews in the middle of the Second Jewish Revolt took over Herodium. Well, this is from that 2nd century. So when the Jews took over Herodium, they put a mikveh here in the middle of this fortress. And again, we see, today you can see mikveh all over, all over Palestine because they were everywhere. This, as I pointed out in the model, this in the time of Herod would have been a reception hall. Part of the fortress would have been a reception hall, but was converted to a synagogue during the 2nd century A.D. by the Jews that took over Herodium as part of the Second Jewish Revolt. And so, going in here, you can see some of the artifacts left over from, to show that this was being used as a synagogue up on top of Herodium. Now, from the top of Herodium, which again, think of this like a volcano. It's like a mountain with a flat top, okay? From up on top, there are tunnels that lead to the outside of the mountain. Now, we've talked about, back when we talked about Megiddo, when we looked at Hazor, we looked at Beersheba, cities that were tells, so artificial mountains built up over time, that had water systems where there were tunnels that were dug so that you could get to your source of water without when you've been besieged by your enemy. Well, the tunnels in Herodium are partly from the water system that Herod the Great would have built, and partly from tunnels that would have been dug by the Jews during that Second Jewish Revolt. So there's a system of tunnels that there's a way to access them from the top of Herodium, and then a system of tunnels. The first part of the tunnels are the old water system of Herod the Great, but eventually you can connect up with the tunnels that the Jews would have dug, when they took over this mountain. But they've made it where you can access the tunnels today with putting in handrails and such. But as you go through there, you find things like this, which this would have been a cistern dated back to the time of Herod the Great. So again, all the way back to 15 BC, cisterns that were part of the water system where he could store fresh water to be able to send people down the tunnels and access the fresh water. Again, there's multiple cisterns inside the mountain at Herodium. It's pretty interesting to see. Now, when you come out back on the outside, out of one of the tunnels come out near the spot where this tomb is located. And this is, again, I mentioned this earlier, this is the excavated tomb, which is believed to be the tomb of Herod the Great. There's no inscription there. It is believed to be the tomb of Herod the Great because of the writings of Josephus. Josephus identified that Herod the Great was buried at Herodium. And so I only put one picture in here. There's a lot of just, crumbled up rock, and then you've got what would have been the tomb underneath all of that. But if you look in the upper left-hand corner, this is, again, a model of their interpretation of what this structure would have looked like, when it was intact. And so, whether that's accurate or not, we do not, there's no way to know, but, based on the remains that have been found. I also said a minute ago that I would talk a little bit about the theater. I don't know what their ultimate plans are, but what was happening while we were there is they were in the process of rebuilding the theater so that they could open it for concerts. So I don't know if they're planning on rebuilding more of Herodium, but I kind of have mixed feelings about that. You see that in a number of places, but where they're going in and rebuilding things. But it seems to me like, once you rebuild it, you'll never know what was originally found. So if I get to go back, it'll be interesting to see what they continue to do at Herodium. But obviously, this is not an ancient structure with glass windows. So a little interesting in the middle of all of that, archaeological findings to find this, building with a glass window in it. So anyway, okay. Next thing I want to talk about is there's actually two of these. I only went to one of them. But these are two sites. One is Franciscan controlled. We've talked about the Franciscans some in this class. One is Franciscan controlled. One is controlled by the Greek Orthodox Church. But these are locations, again, I haven't been to the Greek Orthodox location, but I believe they're really close to each other. But both purported to be the site where the shepherds lived who received the announcement about the birth of Jesus. So understand traditional site, okay? Because we have no idea where the shepherds were when they heard the announcement about Jesus being born. So anyway, this is Shepherd's Field, which is just outside of Bethlehem. I pointed on the map earlier about where Bethlehem is located. This is, again, it's Franciscan controlled, Franciscan owned and operated. It is the traditional site, again, where the shepherds who received the message about the birth of Jesus. We don't know, one of the reasons why it is identified as the traditional site is because there is a natural cave within this site that is pointed to as, hey, this is the cave that was the home of these shepherds. Again, no idea, but one of the things that our guide pointed out was, even though we have no idea where the shepherds lived, he said this is a good representation of what a natural cave, in the area would look like. And, maybe if Jesus, who was definitely born in nearby Bethlehem, if he was born in a cave, we know he was born in a manger, but if it was in a cave, it would have been a cave like the one that's there in Shepherd's Field. But again, have no way of knowing whether that is the spot or not, most likely not. But it's also, this place also is traditionally identified as Boaz's field. It's kind of a weird thing to have a traditional site for two things that happen that are kind of so completely different. But it's interesting to me that around this place, where there's built up markets and stores and restaurants, and they're named after, one, you might see a restaurant that's called Boaz's Field, and then something else that shepherds something else. And so they're really playing on the two things that this is identified as. I threw this in there, not a cat, but a lamb. Just right outside of Shepherd's Field, encountered this boy carrying a lamb. I don't know if he was actually transporting this lamb or if he was trying to get people to take a picture with him so he could get a tip from him or not. I don't know, but anyway, Olivia, there you go. There's your lamb. This is the entrance to the site known of as Shepherd's Field. Again, Franciscan controlled, which you probably can't read the sign, but it mentions there that this is a Franciscan site. It just so happened that the day we were there was Orthodox Christmas. And so the site was filled with Coptic Christians from Ethiopia who were there to celebrate Orthodox Christmas, which was kind of neat to see them there at the site. This is the inside of the actual cave that's on the site at Shepherd's Field. I put one picture in here because this has the least number of people in it of any picture that I took. Most pictures I took have like 60 or 80 people in it. And so it's hard to tell that it's a cave, but this is, you can kind of see the ceiling is all rock. And so this is the cave, and without seeing the other end of it, it's been set up with benches kind of arranged like pews, almost like a chapel kind of area. And there's a diorama of the birth scene of Jesus that's in there. But anyway, this is the site. This is the entrance to the cave. You can tell how much traffic they get because it says once you go in there, you've only got 5 minutes to stay in it. So Anyway, that's a traditional site. And how do we know it's a traditional site? Because there's a church building there. This is known as I think the Shepherd's Field Chapel. It was a beautiful building, but not very old, built in the 1950s. Had a beautiful cupola inside, lots of beautiful paintings in there. Again, completely irrelevant for Scripture, but a beautiful little chapel there in the middle of Shepherd's Field. Okay. All right. All right. Well, that didn't take very long, I don't think, because it's almost 7 o'clock, so maybe it took longer than I thought. So I'm going to now go back and talk about a site that I skipped before. I mentioned this earlier, that I skipped it because it's not a biblical site. It's not tied to Scripture. But it is an impressive site from an archaeological standpoint, and it was a significant city even back to the time of Jesus. And so the name of the city is Zippori, also referred to as Sepphoris. There's a long story about why it's known as both names. At one point, it was known as Zippori as the primary name. Then it was known as Sepphoris. Then it's back to being Zippori again. So the name is used almost interchangeably from the two. But Zippori is just beside or just above Nazareth. So, we're going way back to where we were, at the beginning of class. So we're back up in the Galilee. This is kind of the southern Galilee area. So we're back pretty far up north. We were way down here just a few minutes ago. Now we've gone up further north. So we've got Nazareth here, which is kind of in line with the southern part of the Sea of Galilee. And just above that, you have Zippori or Sepphoris. And this was a major city, again, even back to the time of Jesus. And because of its proximity to Nazareth, which was the hometown of Jesus, I mean, who knows? Jesus may have gone through this city many times. But again, it's not mentioned in Scripture. It's not significant to the narrative of Scripture in any way. But it is geographically located very close to the city of Nazareth. Mentioned it's a major city in Lower Galilee. It's 4 miles north of Nazareth. Never mentioned in the Bible. The name Zippori comes from the word meaning bird, and the belief is because this is a city built on a hill, and the views from the top of this city are amazing. But the belief is it was called that because it's like a bird's eye view. I mean, it just really, you can see the whole region. It's something, probably the best view of Galilee that I saw the whole time that we were there. I do think it's interesting, though, that the Sanhedrin, which when you think of Sanhedrin, you think Jerusalem, right? Well, Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70, and in the second century, the Sanhedrin moved to Zippori. And so Zippori kind of, became the home of the Sanhedrin in either the 2nd or 3rd century. And the Mishnah, or the commentary on the law, the rabbinic commentary on the law, was completed in Zippori during the 3rd century. So again, some ties into the Jewish religion, obviously. So anyway, a few things at Zippori. I mentioned a number of weeks ago that one thing, I am a sucker for mosaics. I love mosaics. And this is in the site of Zippori. This is the remains of a synagogue from the 5th century AD. So we're talking, 500 plus years after the time of Jesus. And this is past the time when the Sanhedrin moved to Zippori and past the time when the Mishnah was completed. But this, a synagogue where there's not a lot remaining as far as the outside walls. It's contained within a modern building today. But inside, they have the remains of what would have been the floor of this, the floor of this 1,500-year-old synagogue, which is incredibly intact. And just a few things to highlight there, scenes on the floor from items that would have been used in temple worship, like you've got the menorah here within the mosaics, the tiles. You've got the shofar or the ram's horn here. There's other sections that have like the the showbread and have the pitcher, the golden pitcher, and those different things that are within the mosaics on the floor. You also have a depiction here of Abraham, attempting to sacrifice Isaac. So again, tying back to the book of Genesis. I found this fascinating, though. Remember, this is the 5th century A.D. This is a zodiac symbol, and really kind of shows the influence that the Romans had, Roman culture and Roman religion had on the Jewish religion, to where the floor of a synagogue has got mixed in with the imagery, images from the temple, images from the Torah, and then you've got a zodiac symbol in the same kind of tile floor. And so again, the Roman religion having influence over the Jewish religion, and I thought that was fascinating. This is not a particularly large theater, but a kind of Greek style theater that is at Zipporee. I believe this is dated back to the 2nd century. Don't quote me on that. Now, who can tell me what this is? It's a mikveh. On top of the mountain, there is the remains of a residential neighborhood. And I don't know how many mikveh there are in that little residential neighborhood, but they are everywhere. I mean, probably 20, 30, 40 of them that are just all, intertwined within the remains of these buildings that, again, would have been houses. And so, in some of these, still filled with water. They're tapped into, they're filling with rainwater, or they're tapped into some natural water source that they're filled with water. Here's another view of another mikveh that are just scattered all along the top of the mountain there at Zipporee. And incidentally, I've said this before, but I think it's one of the things to think about with mikveh is that a lot of times I'll hear the question of, well, how could 3,000 have been baptized at Pentecost in Jerusalem? Where would they have gone? They wouldn't have gone up to the Sea of Galilee or to the Jordan River, Well, again, there's mikveh everywhere. The concept of baptism was not foreign to the Jews. And so there would have been ample places for baptisms to take place, in and around the city of Jerusalem.
I have a book that said that as of 1997, they have uncovered 48 just around the temple area.
So if you didn't hear that, Miss Eva said that she had a book that said that as of what year?
1997, archaeology.
Yeah, not as of 97, they'd uncovered 48 around the temple area, mikveh. I don't know what that number would be today, but there are mikveh everywhere. And so again, that's something important that always comes to my mind when I would think about a mikveh or see these mikveh is that baptism was not a foreign concept to the Jews, and so they had plenty of places for baptisms to take place. Up on top of Zipporee, there's a citadel, and up on top of that citadel, beautiful views of southern Galilee. Again, the time of year that we were there in January, just beautiful, lush, and green. I mentioned it's just north of the city of Nazareth. This is the city of Nazareth today, a modern Arab city today. Not really an archaeological site. It's a city. It's still a city today, just like Jerusalem's still a city. Nazareth is still a city, just south of Zipporee. It may not look like it from here, but this, underneath all of this is I believe this is a 4th century house. It's known of as Dionysus' house. Dionysus was the god of wine, and this house would have been a wealthy person's home because it has multiple bedrooms, And the most striking thing about it is in kind of the center room, there is this giant mosaic floor. Beautiful. Again, I'm a sucker for mosaics. I love mosaics, but it's a beautiful floor. And the reason why this house is called the Dionysus house is because a lot of the depictions on this mosaic floor are of Dionysus. And so that's why it's referred to as the Dionysus house. But probably the most famous thing in Zipporee is this mosaic of this woman in the floor. And this is known of as the Mona Lisa of Galilee. But again, just a beautiful, beautiful mosaic that's part of this floor in the Dionysus house. Now, this is a different building. It's hard to have any context from just a series of slides, but this is actually kind of at the bottom of the mountain. And this is, I believe this is a 5th century house. Again, another, probably a wealthy person's house, but this is a mosaic floor that was found in the bottom of, what would have been the floor of that house. But all of these depictions are from the Nile, kind of the Nile area of Egypt. You've got like over here the library at Alexandria, and all of these scenes in this mosaic floor are from Egypt, which I found interesting. But I think my favorite thing, other than the mosaic floors and things at Zipporee, my favorite thing was this. And that is, there are, around where that house was uncovered, there are still intact numerous 2nd century Roman roads, okay? And these roads, 2 things about them that really jumped out to me. One, it was kind of neat to see what a Roman road from 2nd century AD would look like. I mean, these stones, it was just a stone road. But how intact they are, to where you notice on these stones how there are these little things carved into them. You see that? This up here that's got 4 little squares beside each other. Anybody have a guess what those are? If you're going along a sidewalk today and you see a chalk line of a square with some lines in it, what do you think that is? Hopscotch. It's kids' games, right? That's what this is. This is, 1,800-year-old kids' games carved into the stones of a 2nd century Roman road. I just thought that was awesome. And then this, I even thought was even better. You notice how in this road that these rocks are not flat? You see the ruts going through the rocks, on the stones on the road? Got to guess what those are? Chariot ruts. I'm like, wow, that is awesome. I mean, that has been preserved to that level. And then, of course, we get to walk on them. We get to walk on them like it was nothing. And of course, so in another 100 years, they'll probably be destroyed. But I just thought that was really neat that the roads have been preserved to the point where you can actually see the ruts from the chariots, from an 1,800-year-old Roman road. But it gives you a sense of, with kind of like with Caesarea Maritima, like what a Roman city would have looked like, and the features of a Roman city. So again, not biblically significant, but definitely some ties to the Jewish religion and ties to Roman culture as well. So anyway, I think that's the last slide. It is. Yes, sir.
We had a different guide, and he told us that there are people who think, since it was 4 miles from Nazareth, there's a good possibility that Joseph and Jesus might have got up and walked over there and worked for quite some time.
Yeah.
And go back home.
That would have been Ami, right? Yeah. So Jerry and I were with the same time, but we had almost 90 people, so we were split into 2 different groups for most of it. And so Jerry was saying that his guide had said that, there is a belief that among some that, Jesus and Joseph may have gone to Zipporee to work. I mean, it's again 4 miles from Nazareth, so very close by. It's hard to imagine that Jesus did not visit Zipporee at some point. I mean, it's the next city over, right? And it's a massive city. Very, very significant city. So, yes, that's right. So Bruce mentioned something. I'm glad you did. So yeah, just right beside this is what is believed to have been the site of Cana of Galilee. And who can tell me what happened in Cana of Galilee? Yeah, Jesus at the wedding that turned water into wine. The only reason I didn't cover that in this class is because there's absolutely nothing to show you other than a church building and a whole bunch of stores selling, water, selling wine. I mean, that's it. That's all you got. I mean, other than it's the only other thing to show you in Cana is that it has nothing to do with the Bible. If you think all the way back to week 1 or week 2 with Caesarea Maritima, I mentioned that Caesarea Maritima was an example of a Roman city that was built on the grid system, okay? And there's a fancy name for that, a Roman name, and I can't remember it off the top of my head. But anyway, obviously a whole lot of modern cities followed the grid system, right? I mean, I've spent a whole bunch of time in New York, and I mean, everybody in New York refers to the cross streets, right? So you know exactly this is in 5th and 42nd. I mean, so you know right where it is. Well, Cana is a Jewish city, and it's just a hodgepodge of streets and curved streets and so you can kind of see the difference between what a Roman city would have been like and what a Jewish city was like. But there's nothing to see in Cana other than this church building, which is supposed to be the site where the wedding took place. But again, we have no idea. But other than that, But the point is that obviously Jesus was moving around this area. So it's hard to imagine that he didn't go through this town at one point or another. Yeah, it was his first miracle, that's right. I heard a comedian one time say that, if James ever attended a wedding, did they expect him to be able to do the same thing? And we're disappointed in him. Yes, sir, Mr. Weber.
Where did the dirt come from?
That's a good question. I don't know if they brought it in from Galilee, or the question was, where did the dirt come from for Herodium? Obviously it had to have it's built in the middle of the desert, so they had to have brought it from somewhere. But I don't know if they brought it from Galilee or from somewhere else. I don't know. Yes, sir.
Where did they get fresh water? How did they come by that and fill up the cistern?
Yeah, I would assume there's a spring somewhere there, but much like, so not just south, but further south, Beersheba, which is in the middle of the Negev desert. I mean, there's a spring there that was part of that water system. So again, I don't know for a fact, but I would assume that there's a spring. I'm sure there's some reason why he built it in that spot. So my guess would be access to water, but I don't know that. So it wasn't like in Megiddo where you can still see the spring like today. So I don't know, but my assumption would be that there's a spring. That there's either a spring or there was some way to catch rainwater, because at Masada, they did not have a spring, and you obviously can't pull it from the Dead Sea. So I didn't talk about this when we did Masada, but in Masada, in the side of this mesa, which is where Masada is built, they had dug these channels into the side of the mountain, and the channels had holes that went kind of inside, and it was designed to collect rainwater and have it run into these holes, and then the servants would get the water in some kind of containers and carry it up to the top. So maybe something like that with Herodium. That'd be a good Google search right there. I don't know. It's a great question that I just don't know the answer to. So, anybody else? All right. Well, so it's 16 after. I know the bell's going to ring any second, but I just want to say thank you for being part of this class. I hope that you found it beneficial. I hope that if you've been there before, that this was a reminder of the incredible things that you saw when you were there. If you've never been there before, definitely this does not do it justice. These two-dimensional pictures cannot do justice to the things that you can see over there. I think Bruce would even agree, even though he's a much better photographer than I am. a picture just can't show you what it's really like. And but I hope that if you've never been and you don't plan on going, that at least gives you some context of, you know, the geography and the architecture and those kinds of things. But if you have a chance to go and you can afford it, go. Go, because it's you know, I had people, I've been teaching and preaching since I was in my early 20s, and all along people say, you need to go, you need to go, you need to go. It's going to change the way you preach. It's going to change the way you teach. And at first I didn't have enough money to go, and then I didn't have enough time to go, and then finally I'm like, I'm going to go. And I really wish I had done it earlier. So if you have a chance to go, I highly, highly encourage you to go, because it definitely brings things to life that otherwise are difficult to understand. So anyway, I think we just had the first bell. Any comments or questions before we dismiss? Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
I want to thank you for teaching this class.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, Becky. It's been my pleasure. This was actually, I don't expect anybody to remember this, but just as the pandemic was starting back in March of 2020, Larry had asked me what I wanted to teach and had asked me to send in the description of the class. And I told him I wanted to teach lessons from the Holy Land, and here's the description of the class. And so when we had the opportunity to start it back up, I had the same conversation. What do you want to teach? I said, well, let's just pick up where we left off, and we'll just stick with the same description and everything. So it took us about 16 months to actually do it, but I hope it was beneficial for you. So, all right. Well, with that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week, and take care.